She wasn't used to kindness. Not from strangers, not from the world. At 19, Mina had learned to keep her head down, move quick, and expect nothing. Life in the slums outside the city had shaped her that way, brutal, fast, and unforgiving. She wore second-hand sandals with the straps stitched back by her own hands, a faded green kurta, and a simple braid that fell over her shoulder. Some said she had a pretty face. She didn't believe them. She didn't have time to. Each morning she swept the front porch of the tailor shop where she worked part-time. Then she'd carry bundles of cloth up 2 flights of stairs, sometimes skipping lunch just to save 10 rupees. Her goal was simple: save enough to pay for her brother's school fees and maybe one day go to nursing school. That day was like any other. The sun was sharp and white in the sky, and the streets were loud with vendors yelling and rickshaws honking. Mina had just finished buying a small bag of rice and a few onions, bare minimum for a week's meals, when she noticed the old woman. She was bent over at the waist, struggling to lift 2 large bags filled with groceries. The people passing by either didn't notice or didn't care. One young man even bumped into her and kept walking without looking back. Mina hesitated for just a second, looked down at her own light bag, then walked over quickly. "Daddy, let me help you," she said softly. The old woman turned, surprised. Her face was wrinkled deep like cracked earth, but her eyes were clear, sharp even. "You don't need to," she said, trying to lift one of the bags. "It's all right. I'm not in a hurry," Mina insisted. Together they carried the bags down the lane to a nearby alley. The old woman pointed at a rusty gate with peeling blue paint. "That's my house," she said. It wasn't a house, it was barely a room behind an iron-grilled door. There was 1 chair, a mat, and an old fan that buzzed like it wanted to give up, but it was clean, neat. The old woman sat slowly, breathing heavy. Mina placed the bags on the floor and straightened up. "Thank you," the woman said. "You're the first person to stop for me in weeks." Mina smiled politely. "It's nothing. I just saw you struggling." "What's your name, girl?" "Mina." The old woman nodded. "Mina. That's a good name. I'm Sharon." They talked for a few minutes, nothing too deep, just enough to feel human. Sharon asked about her work, her family, and when Mina mentioned her brother and her dream of becoming a nurse, the old woman listened with a strange silence. After a while, Mina said she had to leave. As she stood at the door, Sharon said, "Come back tomorrow, I'll cook something for you. You look like you haven't had a full meal in days." Mina hesitated again. Pride and hunger fought inside her. Finally, she nodded and smiled. Okay. She didn't expect anything more. Just a kind moment between strangers. Maybe even a simple meal. But what happened the next day changed everything. When Mina returned the next afternoon, Shirin was waiting, and on her lap was a letter. A letter that would pull Mina into a story she never saw coming. A story that started with kindness and ended with something far, far bigger. The next day, Mina woke early, even though she hadn't slept well. Her mind kept circling back to the old woman's face. Shirin. There was something unusual about her, not her age or her poverty, but something in her tone, the way she had spoken about life. It didn't feel like sympathy. It felt like quiet observation, like someone who had watched the world long enough to understand when something good was standing in front of her. Mina washed her face in the tin basin behind her rented room and brushed her hair. She wore the same kurta from the day before, still clean but with a small tear near the hem. She couldn't afford new clothes. Not yet. Maybe not for a long time. She didn't tell anyone where she was going. What was there to tell? She was just visiting. An old lady. It wasn't like she had friends who'd ask questions, and her mother had passed years ago. Her father had walked away before that. It was just her and her little brother, Sohail. Before leaving, she dropped off 2 boiled eggs for Sohail and reminded him to finish his homework. "I'll be back before dark," she said. Then she walked. The alley looked different in the daylight, a little more broken, a little more forgotten. But Shirin's door was open, and the old woman was sitting just where she had been yesterday. Only this time there was a steel plate with 2 cups of chai and some warm parathas waiting on a stool. "You came," Shirin said without looking up. "Good." Mina smiled. but her eyes darted to the letter still sitting on the old woman's lap. "You didn't have to cook, really." "I know," Shirin said, pouring the chai with a steady hand, "but I've been cooking for myself for too long. It's nice to cook for someone else." They sat and ate quietly at first. Mina was used to silence. She grew up with it. Hunger and silence often went together. After a few bites, Shirin finally picked up the envelope. "This," she said slowly, "was meant for someone else, a granddaughter who stopped visiting 10 years ago." Mina looked at the envelope. It was thick, the kind that holds documents. She doesn't care for old bones and dust. Maybe that's fair. Maybe it isn't, but yesterday when you stopped to help me, I thought, maybe the world hasn't turned entirely rotten. Mina shook her head, confused. "I don't understand." Shirin tapped the envelope. "What if I told you that inside this letter is a bank account? Not a fortune, no, but enough to change a poor girl's life. Enough to pay for school, for rent, maybe even a new start." Mina blinked. "You want to give that to me?" "I'm not giving it to you," Shirin said. "I'm trusting you with it, but it comes with conditions." Now her voice grew heavier. Mina leaned forward, trying to read her eyes. "You don't sell yourself. You don't use it for selfish things. You keep working, keep dreaming. You promise me that. You don't turn into someone who steps on others." Mina's heart was racing. She didn't know what to say. Part of her wanted to cry. Part of her wanted to run. "But why me?" she whispered. Shirin's face softened. "Because you didn't ask. You didn't expect anything, you just helped." Mina didn't take the envelope right away. She stared at it for a long time. A poor girl knows what money can do. It can feed you, free you, or ruin you. It can make others hate you. It can even turn you into someone you don't recognize. Finally, with trembling fingers, she took it. That evening, she didn't walk home. She floated. The envelope had over 2,000 in savings, a small miracle. But miracles always come with a price. Mina just didn't know what that price would be yet. Mina didn't sleep that night. She stared at the envelope tucked inside her pillowcase, her thoughts chasing each other in circles. $7,000. That was more money than she had ever touched in her life. The possibilities stretched out like open roads she'd never believed. She could walk on. Nursing school, proper clothes for Sohail, rent for a better room, maybe even meals with meat again. But every time her mind started to run wild, Shirin's voice would come back to her. "You don't sell yourself, you don't use it for selfish things." That part stuck in her chest like a thorn, because now, for the first time, she had the option to be selfish, to stop carrying other people's burdens, and that choice terrified her. The next morning she returned to the tailor shop. Her boss, Mr. Allam, noticed something different in her face. "You win the lottery or something?" he joked as she lifted the heavy cloth rolls onto the shelf. Mina gave a small smile. "Something like that." But she didn't say anything else. Not to him. Not to anyone. She knew how fast jealousy could twist kindness into something ugly. She'd seen it before. Neighbors turned cold over small things like new shoes or a second meal. So she kept her routine. She worked, she cooked, she cared for Sohail, but she also returned to Shirin's house every evening. Sometimes they shared dinner. Simple things, lentils and rice, maybe roti with mango pickle. Sometimes they just sat in silence. Shirin told stories about her younger days, how she once worked as a schoolteacher, how she raised her daughter alone, how her son-in-law never liked her and moved her out of their home when her daughter died. "I've been forgotten more times than I can count," she said one evening, "but I never let the forgetting turn me cruel." It was in those evenings that Mina started writing again. She had always loved writing, poems, little stories, letters to herself, but had stopped when life got too heavy. Now she pulled out an old notebook each night and wrote quietly by candlelight. She wrote about her mother, about the day she lost her, about how scared she was of becoming invisible like Shirin. She wrote about kindness, how heavy it could be. She didn't know what she'd do with the writing, maybe nothing, but it made her feel alive again. A week passed. She finally told Sohail about the money. Not all the details, just enough. "I can put you in a better school," she said, And maybe even buy your own books, no more borrowed ones. Sohail's eyes lit up like firecrackers. Really? Mina nodded. Really? They went together to the school the next day, paid the admission fees in cash. The clerk looked at her with suspicion but didn't ask questions. Poor girls weren't supposed to carry cash. After that, the rumors started. It began small. One of the other tailors, a woman named Sarah, whispered to someone that Mina had been seen wearing new sandals. Then someone else claimed they saw her coming out of a jewelry store. Not true, but that didn't matter. In their world, gossip moved faster than facts. People said she had a sugar daddy, that she was selling herself, that maybe she'd stolen the money. Even Mr. Allam started looking at her differently, like her hands weren't as clean as they used to be. She tried to ignore it. But words have a way of cutting deeper than wounds, and Mina began to feel them every time she walked through the neighborhood. The stares, the whispers, the way women pulled their children a little closer when she passed. She started walking faster, smiling less. One day she didn't go to Shirin's house. She stayed home crying silently as Sohail studied on the floor beside her. But the next day, Shirin came to her door. She had never done that before. She didn't speak at first, just looked at Mina, her eyes hard but kind. "You think kindness is always rewarded," she said finally. "It isn't. Most times it's punished, but you don't stop being kind because the world is blind to it." Mina didn't answer. She just broke down in Shirin's arms. That night, she made a promise to herself. She would use the money exactly how Shirin wanted her to. No secrets, no shortcuts, and no shame. If people whispered, let them whisper. She had work to do. A life to build, a little brother to protect, and she wasn't going to let gossip define her worth. 2 months passed, and Mina had managed to stretch the money like a mother stretches a last handful of rice, carefully, patiently, with purpose. Half of it went into a fixed deposit. She didn't trust herself to have it all in hand. Another portion went to Sohail's school fees, new uniforms, books, and a second-hand cycle, so he wouldn't have to walk the long distance anymore. She bought new clothes, yes, but only 2 sets. Enough to feel human, not enough to invite envy. She left the tailoring shop quietly one morning, not bothering to wait for Mr. Allam's mood swings or the passive-aggressive comments from the women who had once shared lunch with her. She found a part-time cleaning job at a local clinic. Less pay, but less drama too. She liked the silence of it, the smell of disinfectant, the fresh sheets, the rows of medicine bottles. It felt like a step closer to her dream. The clinic's receptionist, a polite woman named Fatima, noticed Mina's careful eyes. "You read a lot?" Fatima asked. One day, Mina nodded shyly. "I used to. I like science, medicine mostly." "You ever think of applying to nursing school?" Mina looked up, heart skipping. Every day. That was how the application started, with just one question from a stranger. The entrance forms cost Rc 600. Mina paid them without blinking. She borrowed books from a student who had just graduated, spent every night poring over anatomy diagrams, procedures, and basic first aid. Shirin, as always, supported her from her corner of the world. "Don't overthink success," she said one evening. "You deserve it as much as anyone." But, even in those good days, shadows lingered. One of them took the form of a neighbor named Nasir. He was around 30, jobless, and spent most of his time at the street corner tea shop. He had once tried to flirt with Mina. She ignored him politely but clearly. That wounded his ego. So now, every time she walked by, he made sure she heard something nasty. "Rich girl now, eh?" he'd shout. "What's the secret? Special clients?" Others would laugh, but not loudly. They all knew better than to believe him. But silence, Mina had learned, could be just as cruel as words. One afternoon, he took it further. She was returning from the market with eggs and a small pack of milk when he blocked her path. "You walk like you're better than us now," he said, grinning with his broken teeth. Mina didn't stop. "Move." He stepped aside slowly, still smiling. "Don't forget, people like you don't climb too high. The world doesn't let it happen." She walked faster. That night she couldn't sleep. Not out of fear, but rage. The quiet kind. The kind that simmers just below. The ribs. Shirin noticed it. What happened? Mina didn't lie. She told her everything. Shirin leaned back in her chair, expression unreadable. You want my advice? Mina nodded. Keep walking. They want you to stop and brake. You don't. That advice became her shield. She focused harder on her studies, applied for a partial scholarship, started saving receipts, documenting expenses, keeping her notebooks in order, like someone preparing for a future no one else believed she could have. And then, one evening, something unexpected happened. Shirin handed her a key. What's this? Mina asked, surprised. Shirin didn't smile. A storage unit, just outside the city. Mina opened the small envelope attached. Inside was a receipt. A paid rental 2 years in advance. I've kept some things there, Shirin said quietly. Things I never thought I'd give to anyone. Mina looked at her, a strange fear growing in her chest. Why are you giving it to me now? Shirin looked at her without blinking. Because I won't be here much longer. The words hung in the air like dust refusing to settle. Mina didn't respond right away. She just stared at the old woman in front of her, fragile but firm, eyes steady like she'd already made peace with whatever storm was coming. Something inside Mina twisted. Not panic, not yet. Just that dull ache you feel when you know the world is about to change, and there's nothing you can do about it. What do you mean? She finally asked. You're not sick, are you? Shirin gave a weak laugh, one that didn't reach her eyes. When you get to my age, sickness isn't the issue. Time is. Mina's throat dried up. She sat down, slowly, holding the key in her hand like it might burn her fingers. Shirin leaned forward. I'm tired, Mina. The body is slow. The heart is slower. But I'm not scared. I've lived a long, full life. Messy, quiet, lonely, yes, but I got to meet you. That's something. Don't talk like this, Mina said, almost snapping. You're fine. We can go to the hospital. I'll get you checked. I don't want to spend the end of my life in a hospital bed, Shirin interrupted gently. I've seen too many people die in rooms that smell like bleach, alone, waiting for someone who never comes. Mina swallowed hard. She hated this conversation. She hated how calm Shirin was, how accepting. But what's in the storage, she asked, voice barely above a whisper. Shirin looked out the door. The sunlight was fading, stretching shadows across the narrow alley. Letters, journals, some old family things, and one more thing you'll find out when you open it. Mina didn't press, not that night. She stayed a little longer, helped make dinner, and sat beside Shirin in silence as they drank tea with too much sugar. The silence wasn't uncomfortable. It felt like something sacred, like both of them knew something was ending, and neither wanted to speak it out loud. She went home with the key tucked deep in her pocket. The next day she woke before sunrise, rode a crowded bus 2 hours out of the city, and found the small storage facility listed on the receipt. It was an unremarkable building, rows of steel doors. A sleepy guard, faint smell of rust. She found Unit 47, unlocked it, and stood still for a long moment. Inside was a dusty trunk, a suitcase, and 2 large cardboard boxes. Nothing dramatic, no gold bars, no shocking discoveries. But when she opened the trunk, she found something that made her sit on the concrete floor and cry. There was a photo album, black and white pictures. A younger Shirin with thick hair tied in a bun holding a baby, her daughter most likely. Another photo, Shirin standing outside a school with a chalkboard behind her. Notes, poems, clipped. Newspaper articles, a diary. Mina sat and flipped through them, reading her life backward. The heartbreaks, the resilience, the parts of her that no one had seen in decades. One entry stood out, dated nearly 20 years ago. If one day someone finds this, I hope they know I lived quietly but honestly. I loved my daughter. I miss her still. And if by some miracle I meet a soul kind enough to sit with an old woman and just listen, then I'll know I wasn't forgotten by the world. Mina closed the book, her hands trembling. There in the second box was a stack of unused nursing books, newer than expected, some barely opened, with a note on top that said, "For the girl who deserves a second chance, even if she doesn't. Know it yet." It broke Mina. She hadn't realized how much weight she'd been carrying until then. She wept like a child in that quiet storage room, tears falling on dusty cardboard and handwritten words. Shirin hadn't just seen her, she'd prepared for her. That night, Mina returned to the old woman's home with a small bag of groceries and the photo album in her hand. Shirin looked at her, nodded once and said, "So, you opened it." Mina smiled through her tears. "I opened it, and I'll guard it, just like you guarded everything all these years." Shirin didn't say thank you. She didn't have to. Sometimes love isn't in the words. It's in the weight someone lets you carry. The days that followed felt heavy, not in a bad way, but in the way that comes when life starts to feel too big to hold in your hands. Mina went about her routines like usual, cooking, studying, working at the clinic, but her heart was somewhere else now. Every night she checked in on Shirin, not just because she wanted to, but because a quiet fear had begun building inside her. Shirin was getting weaker. Her hands shook a little more when she lifted her cup. Her voice sometimes trailed off mid-sentence, like her mind was somewhere far behind her body. But she never complained, not once. They spoke less and less, but Mina started reading to her, passages from the diary, bits of the letters she had found in the trunk, even poems written in Shirin's shaky handwriting. Sometimes Shirin would smile softly. Other times she'd stare at the wall with a distant look in her eyes, like she was watching her life play out again. One evening, while Mina was oiling Shirin's hair, something she had done for her mother, long ago, Shirin spoke with a whisper barely louder than the wind outside. "You remind me of her," she said. "My daughter. The way you care, the way you don't ask for anything." Mina paused. "Do you want to write her? Your granddaughter, I mean. Maybe she doesn't know you're still here." Shirin shook her head faintly. "If she wanted to find me, she would have. Some people, when they walk away, they don't look back. And that's all right. I've made peace with being a chapter no one wants to reread." Mina didn't press. She just nodded and continued combing her thin silver hair. That night, Mina sat on her mattress thinking hard. She opened the envelope with the remaining money and stared at the balance written inside. She still had nearly a 90,000 left, enough to do something meaningful. She made a decision. The next morning, she returned to the clinic, waited for Fatima to finish her phone call and asked for help. "I want to register for the next nursing entrance cycle," Mina said firmly. Fatima smiled. "You'll need recommendation letters, transcripts, a proper ID." "I have everything," Mina interrupted. "I've been preparing quietly." Fatima looked surprised. "And money?" Mina held up the envelope. "I've got enough. But if I don't do this now, I'll regret it forever." 3 days later, her application was in, and this time it didn't feel like a dream, it felt real. That evening, when she told Shirin, the old woman gave her a tired but proud look. "Good, you're stepping into your life now." "You helped me do that," Mina said. Shirin raised a bony hand and pointed to Mina's chest. "No. That came from here." The next few weeks moved quietly, peacefully. Mina stopped responding to the gossip, stopped flinching at side glances. She had better things to carry now, goals, love, a strange kind of family no one could take from her. But one night she arrived at Shirin's room to find the door ajar. Something felt off. She pushed it open, slowly. Shirin was on her bed, eyes closed, lips parted slightly. A soft breeze moved the curtain. The room was still. Mina rushed forward, heart in her throat. Shirin's chest was rising, barely. But it was enough. She called for help, shouted until a neighbor brought a rickshaw. They carried Shirin to the nearest hospital. Mina stayed beside her all night in the emergency ward, holding her hand, whispering stories into her ear, as if words alone could keep her alive. The doctor came out at dawn, eyes tired. "She's stable for now. Severe dehydration and weakness. But you brought her just in time." Mina didn't cry. Not then. Instead, she stayed awake for the next 48 hours, barely eating, barely speaking, just waiting, watching, hoping. When Shirin finally opened her eyes on the third morning, Mina exhaled like she'd been holding her breath for a year. "Still here?" Shirin croaked. Mina smiled through her tears. Still here. But something had shifted. The truth was clear now. Time wasn't a question anymore. It was a countdown. And Mina realized she didn't want to waste another second pretending that everything would stay the same. The hospital discharged Shirin after 5 days, but Mina knew things would never go back to how they were. Shirin had grown quieter, her steps slower. She no longer tried to pretend she could manage on her own. Something in her eyes had softened, not defeated, but ready, like someone folding their final clothes before a long journey. Mina had already made her decision. She moved in with Shirin. She gave up her rented room, packed everything she and Sohail owned into 2 small suitcases, and set up a mat in the corner of Shirin's home. It wasn't even a full room, just enough space for them to sleep, eat and live simply. But it felt full, safe, honest. Every morning, Mina prepared breakfast while Sohail got ready for school. She'd make soft khichdi for Shirin and warm tea, help her dress, comb her hair. They would sit outside for a little while, watching the children play in the alley, the vegetable cart rolling by, life moving forward around them. Shirin often rested through the day, her energy flickering in and out. Mina studied during those hours, flipping through her nursing books, underlining with worn-out pencils, rereading terms until they stuck. She even began practicing simple procedures using cotton balls and water on herself, wrapping fake bandages, taking imaginary vitals. She was focused, driven, but still afraid, because in the background she could feel life slipping, one breath at a time. One evening, after Sohail had gone to a friend's house, Mina and Shirin sat in the warm dusk, the light golden on the cracked walls. "I need to ask you something," Shirin said suddenly. "Anything," Mina replied. Don't spend too much crying. I don't want that." Mina's jaw clenched. "Please don't say that." "I have to because I've seen people break and never put themselves back together. I don't want that for you. Grieve, yes, but live more than you grieve." Mina didn't speak for a long time. Then she reached for Shirin's hand, held it tightly. "I'll cry," she said, "but I'll live too, I promise." That night, after Shirin fell asleep, Mina wrote a letter. Not to anyone in particular, just her thoughts. She wrote about fear, about love, about how a poor, ignored girl could stumble into something so sacred without warning, about how the world often gives nothing and then suddenly gives everything all at once. And then something strange happened. She found herself writing not just her story, but Shirin's too. The whole journey, how they met, what they shared, the change they'd sparked in each other. She filled 2 full notebooks in 3 weeks. One day she showed the pages to Fatima at the clinic. Fatima read them slowly, eyes wide. This could be a book." Mina laughed, brushing it off. "No one wants to read about old women and poor girls." Fatima looked up, serious. "That's exactly why they should." Fatima had a cousin in publishing, small magazine work mostly. She offered to share the pages. Mina agreed, more out of curiosity than hope. A month passed. The entrance results came first. She had made it. Not only that, she had ranked higher than she ever expected, high enough to qualify for a government seat. The tuition fees were now a fraction of what they could have been. Mina cried that day, so did Shirin. And then, a week later, Fatima returned with an envelope. It was a letter from a local women's journal. They loved Mina's story, raw, human, honest. They wanted to feature it in a special edition. A modest payment, her name in print. It wasn't fame, it wasn't fortune. But for a girl who used to hide her dreams under a broken cot, it was everything. She ran home that day, her feet barely touching the ground. She burst into Shirin's room, held her hands, and told her everything. The old woman smiled, too tired to speak much. But her eyes said it all, pride, peace, love. And then the next morning Mina woke early to make tea. She called Shirin for breakfast. There was no answer. She walked over, gently touched her shoulder. Stillness. Shirin had gone, quietly, gently, just like she lived. Mina sat beside her for hours. No tears at first, just silence. Then, slowly, her body folded into itself, and she wept. Loud, ugly, sobs that came from the deepest part of her chest. She didn't try to stop them, and when she was done, she stood up. She called the hospital. Then she called Fatima. and then she sat down, picked up her pen, and began to write again. Because Shirin had given her two things, a future and a voice, and Mina wasn't going to waste either. The funeral was simple, a white cloth, a few neighbors, silence where there could have been songs. Mina insisted on doing most of it herself. She dressed Shirin for the last time, bathed her gently, brushed her hair the way she liked it, and whispered one final promise into her ear. "I'll live the life you gave me." Sohail stood by her side, confused but quiet, knowing enough not to speak. Fatima came too, bringing fresh flowers and a box of sweets for the children who lingered nearby. There were no family members, no lost granddaughter, no one else. Just Mina, her brother, and a woman who had become more than blood ever could. After they buried Shirin under the tamarind tree near the back of the neighborhood, Mina returned to the small room they had shared. She sat on the bed for hours, not crying anymore, just staring at the sunlight falling across the empty mat where Shirin used to sit. And then she got up. She folded the clothes, cleaned the floor, packed the books, and then she wrote. Every evening after work, she'd write. She wrote her story in full. No dressing it up, no drama, just truth. From that one simple act of kindness on a busy street to the life-altering love that followed. She didn't make herself the hero. She didn't paint Shirin as a saint. She told it the way it happened, real, messy, kind and quiet. And people read it. The magazine that published her piece asked for more. A blog featured her. A small news station called her the girl who inherited nothing but grace. They didn't know how wrong they were. She had inherited everything. The nursing school semester started in July. Mina attended her first class in a pressed uniform and with the same notebook she'd used for writing Shirin's story. She kept a small photo of her, just one tucked inside the cover, looking out with that same knowing smile. She excelled in her studies, quietly, steadily. She didn't try to prove anyone wrong. She wasn't chasing revenge or recognition. She was just building, healing, becoming. Sohail began topping his class. He started helping her at home, cooking, sweeping, doing the little things without being asked. He was growing up watching her work harder than anyone else, and that had changed something inside him too. The money eventually ran out, but it didn't matter. By then she had earned a scholarship. She was tutoring 2 younger students for pocket money, and she had begun drafting her story into a short book, something people could hold in their hands and read without scrolling. And the whispers? They faded. People forgot the gossip, or maybe they just moved on to other targets. Either way, Mina stopped walking with her head down. She held her chin up now, not out of arrogance, but because she had seen what it meant, to live with dignity. She'd learned that from a wrinkled hand offering tea in a tiny kitchen, from a stranger who became family, and from a love that asked for nothing and gave everything. Years later, when she finally stood on a small stage, holding her nursing degree, her speech was short. "I'm just here because I helped an old woman carry her groceries." People laughed. But she didn't. She looked into the crowd at the young girls sitting in the front row, at the tired mothers, the workers, the quiet faces with quiet dreams, and said, "Kindness isn't loud, it doesn't shout, but it changes everything." And as the applause echoed around her, Mina stepped down, calm and steady. She didn't walk off the stage like a star. She walked like someone who had finally become herself. And in the small corner of her heart, she carried Shirin still, whispering, watching proud.